All right, we're going to talk briefly about inverse functions. To find an inverse function, well, we're starting with a function we need to call f of x, y. We switch x and y. We're going to solve for y, and then we're going to call y the inverse of our function. We have that notation to say that. So, if we're starting with some function, we'll start with 3x plus 7. Well, of course, our steps, we're going to call f of x, y. We're going to switch x and y. Now we're going to solve for y. Often we see answers left like this, as in our book does. You could leave it like this, or we could go ahead and divide each term by 3 in order to see what the actual slope and y-intercept would be. This would be equal to 1/3 x minus 7/3. I think we like to see it this way better, so we can see our slope, we can see our y-intercept, and we want to call this the inverse of our original function. And so here is our inverse. All right, let's imagine we have, well, not even imagine, we have f of x equals x plus 3 squared minus 1. If we want to find the inverse of this, all of our steps remain the same. The only thing different is when we solve for y, we have different steps because this is a different situation for us here. So we're going to call f of x y. We switch our x and our y. And now we need to solve for y here. Realize what y is a part of. Y is a part, it's inside of this term, y plus 3 squared. And so our first goal is to get this term by itself, and I do that by adding 1 to both sides. Now I've got x plus 1 equals y plus 3 squared. And I need to get inside of this parentheses, I need to get inside of here to get y all by itself. So the first thing I need to do is undo all of this being squared, and to undo that, I take the square root of both sides. The square root and this being squared cancel out. We are left with just y plus 3. They undid each other. Those are inverse operations. Over here, we have the square root of x plus 1. Because we took the square root, we have both positive and negative. So we put that out in front. The last step to get y by itself, now we can clearly see we just subtract 3 from both sides. And so now we have y by itself. And on this side, we've got negative 3 plus or minus the square root of x plus 1. You could also write this as plus or minus the square root of x plus 1 minus 3. We could write it either way here. Either way, this equals y. We could put the negative 3 in the front, or we could put negative 3 in the back. And our final step is we don't want to call this y. I know I circled this so that I can make a point. We could show it either way, but we don't want to call this y. We want to make sure we know this is the inverse of our original function. So our final answer, I'm going to write it as positive and negative square root of x plus 1. And then outside of this, we have that minus 3. That is the inverse of our original function. We don't even have to have f of x. We could have h of x, or g of x, or r of x, or p of x, or something like that. It doesn't have to be f. If we have h of x equals the square root of x minus 3 plus 6. Very similar to the last one we did. The only difference is instead of something being squared, we have a square root. Well, in order to handle this, I know my steps. I'm going to change my function here to be y equals the square root of x minus 3 plus 6. I'm going to switch my x and my y because that's what I have to do when I'm finding an inverse. I'm switching my x's and my y's. And now I need to solve for y. To solve for y, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. I've got x minus 6 equals the square root of y minus 3. To undo the square root, we know to undo a square root, we're going to square both sides. And so we have x minus 6 squared equals y minus 3. And to get y completely by itself, we're going to add 3 to both sides. And so we have x minus 6 squared plus 3 equals y. Final step, we change y to be the inverse of our original function. Since our original function was h of x, I'm making sure we understand this is the inverse of h of x. So there's the inverse of our original